I sold my wife's soul for fortune and fame because she got in my way. Her incessant pleas for love and affection were no more than a plague upon my being. This woman was not deserving of my graceful touch or even unconditional love. If not for her, I would have been a world-renowned success, but alas, I had to sell her soul so that I could prosper. And now convinced that she was the reason for my failure, I adopt the belief that what I did was right. In the early days of December, we had become wed, and I took her hand knowing that her soul would be mine, and in the bleak hours of night, I made my pact with the devil. And with her blood, I sold her soul in exchange for fortune and fame. There is no one who should take responsibility for this transaction other than my wife. Had she groveled at my feet and adored every piece of art I made, I might have reconsidered what I had to do. Her pathetic begging rendered me unable to see beyond the sorrow in her eyes. Who was she to take pity on me? I had traversed the darkest streets of Rome, learned from teachers whose mastery surpassed legends, and even still I could not afford myself more than a meager lifestyle. I deserved the silk robes and sheets, and to drink fresh milk and honey. She possessed within her the capacity to suggest that fame and fortune were not a sole means of happiness. But I contest that when the deal was struck, I felt a euphoria I had never known. Something within me stirred, and for once I felt that I had gotten what I deserved, and the price I had to pay was small, hardly worth losing sleep over. All it cost me was an infertile wife that could never fulfill my desires as a man, as a husband, and she would never look at me with eyes of adoration. By chance, she had become sick, and still her glare upon me was the same. As she laid on her deathbed, I reminded her of what a failure of a woman she was. She could not grant me a son, therefore she did not deserve even the slightest bit of sympathy. While her weight seemed to vanish, and her once milky skin became waxy and near transparent, and her eyes devolved into gray and glassy orbs, my career began to move mountains. Where there once wasn't a market, one bloomed into existence. I scoffed at my dying wife as people from around the world flocked to my doorstep with the corpses of their deceased spouse or father or mother, and I bragged about how I had to paint them, how I was not wrong, and how I am now soon to be legend. She once had the nerve to tell me that painting cadavers wasn't natural, that it was a reflection of my own fetish, but I refused to listen to such thing. She was only a sick woman at the time she said that, and obviously she knew nothing about the intricacies of art. I recall a particular disagreement we had once. She told me that some people don't reach those high levels of fame and fortune not because they don't deserve it, but sometimes things just don't happen, regardless of talent. By saying that, she suggested that I don't deserve it. Within a few days of that remark, she pleaded for me to stay at home with her and spoon-feed her soup and bathe her, for her weakness had strangled every part of her body. Her bed had become her tomb, for I could not be burdened by a person who cannot help themselves. I had contracts to fulfill. I had to maintain my lifestyle, and at this point, as her health nearly fell into the skeletal hand of death, I did not look back or even speak to her. With each pass I made by her bed, she'd press her fingertips against me with the sole intent of reminding me that she was rotting alive in her tomb. Her skin became black and bluish from infection, and her smell was... I can't describe it. I was rejoiced when her hands stopped moving and the orbs in her skull stopped following me. Her face had become gaunt, and the whiteness of her skull surfaced beneath the thin layer of her flesh. I knew that she had died, and the rush I got when I noticed her chest no longer rise and fall was intoxicating. No longer would I have to hear the words of my wife. Never again would her eyes fall on me. But the day she died, the contracts no longer came, and the bargain had been fulfilled. I had been used up, and now I sit in my palace made of black marble. My home sits on top of a mountain. It took 4 years to build it, and in the room in which I paint, I sit. I wait for someone to appear. My room is dimly lit by candles. It is my place of study. Here I have collections of the greatest artists who have ever lived, but no one knows their names, for they were my teachers. Their art has been called mediocre at best by visitors, and even by collectors who had walked with Vincent van Gogh, but I disagree. They do not possess the artistic eye that I do. They do not understand like I do. Van Gogh was but a fool in comparison to my own work. I had tried to convince the foolish public of my greatness, but it wasn't until I made the deal with the devil that my talent gained the recognition it deserved. But these things have long since passed. As I had declared earlier, the contract stopped with the death of my wife, and in turn, the droves of people fame yielded me decreased. After many nights, the whispers became screams, and they did not let me sleep. At one point in time, I had been reduced to drinking only tea and eating bread, but now I've had to pull myself from my hoard of gold to sustain myself. I felt as though threads of my own soul unwove whenever I had to part ways with my gold. This is what makes me important. It's proof, it's evidence that my talent truly is real and that the life I had lived and paid for was not a fabrication. But I cannot escape the tragedies of the mind. My life now is no more than a splinter in the spines of the people I surround myself with. Their company would not exist if not for my vast wealth, and I know they come to my home only to discover where my hoard of gold resides. I clutch my ebony cane and push myself up from my velvet chair. Before me is the outside world, and it is cold, dark. Snow whips around my courtyard. It beats against a fountain made of marble. A decade ago, once the fame and fortune was new, I ordered a marble fountain to be carved. A mermaid of sorts. She flung her head back in pleasure, and beside her was her lover, who I had designed to resemble myself. Since then, her head had been broken off by vandals, and the trident had been split in half. Blame should not rest on my shoulders, for though I requested diamonds and sapphires to lace the trident, I should have every right to display my incredible wealth, regardless of consequence on my own property, but the real world doesn't care about such things. After a few years, my wonderful fountain felt the violations of many thieves, and in time all that remained was the marble. No jewels, no gems, nothing. I leave my small study and step into my hallway. The carpet upon the floor is a deep red, and it protects my beautiful, 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 amazing cherry oak floors. I had taken great care to ensure that not a scratch would come to the surface of these floors. A golden railing was to my left side, and it was studded with diamonds and rubies. I leaned to my left against my cane and looked down the hall. There is one room at the end on the left. It is a simple room with no more than a flat table. I hear something. Someone had knocked on the door 3 times. I felt the knock. It was loud and echoed through my entire palace. The front door was on the level below me and to my left. I approached the golden railing and looked over. The knocking returned, and I stood and waited. Maybe this is it. Perhaps somebody has finally realized the greatness of my talent and has made it all the way up here. A few paces in front of me is a staircase that descends about 20 feet. I approach the staircase and place one foot upon it. My knees ache, and it hurts to put any weight on my left side. The knocking returned. I said, "Hang on a minute." I limped down the stairs and took a firm stance before my front doors. I pulled on the handles and opened it. "Hello," I said. A pale woman with bright blue eyes and dark brown hair stood before me. She held, what I believe anyway, to be a sack of gold. No more than a dozen freckles dotted her cheeks, and her nose was red because of the cold winds. She smiled and spoke. "Hi. I've seen your work and I really enjoyed it, and recently my father passed away and we want something to remember him by." Beside her stood a large, dark brown coffin. I can only assume that her father is within it. The woman continued, "And, well, are you accepting new jobs?" My heart thumped in my chest. For so long, I've felt irrelevant to the world, that there was nothing more I could offer to anyone, and this gave me something to be hopeful about. Now I may have purpose, but I'm not free. I said, "I can paint a necro painting of your father, but it will cost you 3,000 gold. The woman said, 3,000? I thought your fee was usually 1,000. My soul within smiled. I scanned the world behind her. There wasn't a carriage or even a horse. This woman pushed this coffin all the way up here on her own. I live on a mountain. She doesn't have a shred of leverage to bargain with. I exhaled a deep breath and looked into her eyes. I said, "Look, lady, I am very busy working on pieces from other clients. It may be a few weeks before I get to him, and I see that you pushed him up here by yourself. I could also rent you a room, but that will be an extra 2,000 gold pieces." The woman's eyes darted. She twisted away from me and sighed. She said, You, I could understand the reasonable fee of 1,000 gold, but you want to take 5,000 from me? No wonder no one deals with you anymore." She stepped close to the doorway. I moved my body in front of her. I said, "I'm sorry, but clients are not allowed into my home." She replied, "Mr. Potts, it's freezing out here. I've had to move him all the way up here on my own, and I just need 5 minutes inside. Let me warm up and I'll be gone. I'll pay you the damn 3,000 gold." I smiled and said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you cannot enter." She looked down and kicked her feet against the stone walkway. She said, "Fine, I'll pay you 5,000, but you have to rent a room out for the night." I chuckled under my breath and opened the door. She passed through and shook off the snow. I looked over the cold coffin and pulled it into my home. It glided rather easily. She said, Okay. Where do I go to get some sleep or warm up for that matter?" I ignored her question and looked over the coffin. She stood in silence, I assume in wait of a response, but I haven't time for such things. My fingers wrapped around the coffin and I pulled it under the stairwell. Beneath my stairs was an elevator that I lifted straight into the hallway just outside my studio. I closed the elevator doors and stood beside the coffin. After a brief moment, I rose a single level and pushed the coffin into my studio. A thick and dark wooden table sat before me. It's been some time since I've had to move a body, but I figured it'd be best to get it over with now. I wheeled the coffin to the side of the table and opened the top and bottom lids. Waxy and nearly translucent, the corpse looked straight into the sky. His pale blue eyes remained fixed. His chest does not rise and fall, and his skin is splotchy with pools of coagulated blood. The liquid in his eyes had gathered at the back of their vitreous. I pull on the corpse, and the liquid within his glassy orb sloshed from side to side. His jaw, once shut, fell slightly open, and his head wobbled to and fro. I slid my arms under his armpits and lifted him from the coffin. His body was heavy, but not too heavy for me. His head lopped against my shoulder as I twisted him around and slid him onto the table. My fingers poked through his thin skin, and the goo of rotting flesh trickled down my palm. I slid a sheet over his lower half and smiled. I smile for the smell, the sight, everything about this I have missed. After I had laid him out on the table, I leaned to my left side and took a heavy breath. How long it's been since I've done this, I can't remember. Before the table is a stool, and in front of it is a dusty old canvas and brushes that had not been used in years. Small cans of paint are perfectly organized, from hottest to coolest colors, red to blue. I lift a can and open it. The paint inside had dried up. I pushed the head of the corpse so that it would face skyward. I assume his head had lopped over to the side as I sat him down. After a long study of the man's features, I recited within myself, this could very well be the last job I will ever have. My eyes fell upon the man's, and for a brief second an unrequited terror struck through me. His eyes, though for a flash didn't seem lifeless at all. Though the sloshing liquid within clearly reflected the moonlight, they looked into me with determination. I felt his stare upon me much like one may feel when someone is being watched, but unsure from where. I pushed the man's head so that way it faced skyward again. My jaw clenched shut, for this was the second time I had to do this. As his head swiveled because of my touch, his eyes remained fixed upward. The brief seconds between then and now seemed long. I took a breath in and studied my canvas. At one point in time it was white, but now it has become yellow and aged. I placed the paintbrushes at my side and organized them from largest to smallest. Once again, the eyes of the corpse fell upon me. But this time I saw it from the corner of my eyes. His head deliberately moved to face me, and his eyes turned and locked onto mine. I did not look into the face of the corpse. I ignored his glare and focused on the canvas. Terror froze the muscles in my body as I held a single paintbrush in my right hand. It was the last paintbrush I had to set down. It shook as my hand trembled. I did not blink, nor did I breathe. It didn't feel like I was breathing anyway, and I turned away from the canvas and corpse. Once my vision had cleared, and I regained every bit of sanity as a result of taking deep breaths, I stood up from the stool and faced my doorway. It was hard to move, and I could feel the eyes of this man gazing upon me. They scratched against the walls of my mind, and I felt that he knew he terrified me. I left my studio and quietly closed the door, making sure to avoid the sight of the rotting corpse. My home seemed larger than before. The walls appeared to be taller, but no, that is not true. My house has not changed shape or size. I've lost my edge, and that is all. The woman has yet to pay me. I looked at the door of my studio and shook my head. No way am I going in there just yet. My mind ran cold as a terrible thought crossed me. No, she wouldn't do such a thing. She was a good woman, and to even consider that she would do that is beyond her realm of character. She adored me. She admired me. I turned away from the studio door and descended the stairs. The woman was gone, and the front door had been shut. A sack sat in the middle of the floor. I approached it and lifted it to my eye. It was heavy. I opened it and looked within. Small stones and sand were all I saw. My heart dropped and shattered as I bit my lip. Stupid me. She doesn't care for the man above in my studio. All she cared about was dropping off a body she didn't want to deal with. But who would travel all the way up here to do that? I find it hard to believe that anyone would do that with no other intention than to get under my skin. I have never wronged anyone, nor have I done anything to deserve this. I dumped the sack out, and the sand and stones crashed against the floor. On top of the small pile shone a single piece of gold. I lifted the piece of gold to my eye and examined it. The vein in my forehead bulged as my face became hot with anger. This is it. This is all she brought me. One piece of gold. My artistic talent is worth several thousand more than this, worth a lot more. I turned on my heel and looked around my palace. It stood empty and still. Not a breeze pushed before or behind me. All was silent. Ma'am, I said. Look, I'm not going to do this job. I deserve more than one piece of gold, and I demand that you immediately remove yourself and the cadaver you brought with you. I leaned back and stretched my arms. The air felt hot as it brushed through my fingertips, but my skin felt cool. I can't exactly explain the sensation that washed over me, only that it was a rush. The kind of rush I've never felt. But all the same, I detached from the curious wonder and studied my staircase. Maybe that woman walked upstairs, or, well, I don't know. I turned around and looked at my front door. I opened the door and looked outside. Snow continued to whip in the air, but more importantly, there weren't footprints in the snow. The woman hasn't left yet, for even though there was snow barreling down upon my palace, her footprints would still be visible. She'd still be visible, as I can see for at least a mile from where I am. I looked down from my door and pressed my face into the bitter cold. Snow cuts against my cheeks, and my eyebrows become stiff with frost. It's far too cold outside for her to walk. I said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but if you could just come out, I may offer you a room for the night," I lied. "But you need to come forward." She's only a small woman. I could easily overpower her and send her off into the frozen world. But I didn't hear anything. I investigated the elevator and saw only emptiness. And after that, I shut the door and walked away from it. This woman has likely stowed herself away somewhere in my home and unfortunately locked herself into a room. That is fine. I have keys to all of the rooms in this beautiful home. But what do I do? She's a stranger trying to squat in my home. She did not pay for these floors and walls or for these gold railings and Persian rugs. She made no contribution to the wonderful things I had worked so hard for. The things my talent has provided me. My talent, of course, my talent. My incredible talent. This woman is no more than a sponge trying to suck up the rewards my blood and sweat and dedication have provided. No, I mustn't let her stay here, even if the cold outside would entomb her in ice. I closed the front door and inched my way upstairs. I had no intention of returning in the elevator, for the cadaver still bothered my soul. It did look at me, didn't it? Its eyes did move, didn't they? I think so. As I approached the top of the stairs, something fell to the floor in my studio. The thud was deep and loud, as if a body had fallen. Maybe the cadaver had tried to sit up and fell. No, that is a stupid thing to think. The cadaver is a product of death. It cannot move. I walked to the edge of the studio door and gripped the handle. The steel of the handle was cold. I leaned against the door and pressed my ear to it. Silence, only silence. As I turned the handle, I felt my heart race against my sternum. No, I cannot have a heart attack here. Not now. After I exhaled a deep breath, I pushed the studio door open and looked in. The cadaver was not on the table where I left it, and the coffin remained. It sat still, but it was closed. The candles I had lit continued to flicker. Where is that dead man gone? I said. In truth, I didn't really want to know wherever this man went. I don't. Hopefully, she had come and put him into the coffin, but I fear that may not be true. I stepped close to my table and looked at the latches on the coffin. They were not secure. Therefore, the coffin was not sealed shut. I hesitated to walk forward to approach the coffin and rest my hands upon it, but alas, I had to do such a thing. I pressed my palm against the cold metal of the coffin and lifted the lid. It creaked as it arose, and as I looked down, I saw nothing. The coffin was empty, and the smell of decay did not remain, as if a cadaver had never lain in this coffin. The lining of the coffin was white and clean. I don't understand. I don't. I closed the lid of the coffin and locked the latches. The woman has to be playing some kind of foul trick on me. Obviously, a game only the foolish and poor would play at, but I don't know. She wasn't that big of a woman and didn't seem to have much muscle to her body. In truth, she was quite feminine. No, she couldn't have lifted the cadaver from the table and gotten him out of my home. She would have had to go down the elevator or the stairs, for there are no other ways to leave my home. I approached the coffin so that I may peer deeper into it. I slammed the lid shut and locked the latches, for there was something in there, not a man or a woman or even a small creature. It was small and glassy, white. I lifted the lid again and tucked into the corner closest to me was no. I shut the coffin once again. No. After a few breaths, I slowly pry open the coffin, this time more prepared, and there it lay, dead and still. I drew my gaze upon it, and what lay in the corner was a single glassy eye. Vomit roiled in my throat as its stare swiveled and fell upon me. Attached to the eye remains the optic nerve. The eye lies in a shallow pool of blood. My stomach lurched as I gazed into the eye. It reflects the same kind of soulful stare that joyous people have, but alas, this cannot be. I had checked the coffin and saw nothing of the sort in there moments sooner. This cannot be real, it cannot. I lowered my hand into the coffin and pressed my fingertips against the glassy orb, against the pupil of the eye. My fingertip trembled as it rubbed against its smooth surface. This is real. This is real. I twist my left side and retch upon the floor. I have painted hundreds, if not thousands, of cadavers over my lifetime, but why does this cause my soul to writhe? To vomit, to expel the strength of my soul. I cannot fully explain why I have lost all sense of myself, why I cannot bring to life the smallest amount of courage, or to even speak as my stomach settles and I fall to my side. I cover my mouth to prevent the vomit from coming, but it has no use. It rushes from my throat and through my fingers. I slump to the side of the coffin and lie down. The air is cool and calm. Not a speck of dust is upon the floor, and all is silent. The smell of my vomit upon the floor twists my stomach and strangles my throat. I hold my breath with the hope of avoiding another spill of my stomach. After I climbed back up to my feet and stood beside the coffin, I look in and see the single eye resting at the bottom of the coffin. The glossy orb remains fixed and still. I exhaled a deep breath and limped out of my studio. My fingers wrap around the handle and I pull upon the door. As I pass through the doorway, I exhale a deep breath and push the door shut. As the door shuts, a loud crash erupts from the other side of the door in my studio. My fingers are stuck, my body frozen in petrification. I turn my eyes upward and look into the door. I turn my head and listen. Nothing. Silence. Nothing is moving. Nothing is scurrying about. It's in my imagination. I chuckled. If it's my imagination, why not just go in there? I said to myself. I tried to turn the handle, but my hand slid. My palms were still wet. My forehead beaded, and I felt as though needles were prickling my back, and each hair on my neck stood on end. I rubbed my hand against my pants and turned the handle. As I pushed on the door, it slowly creaked open, and the night remained still and silent. I saw the coffin tipped sideways upon the floor. The eyeball had crossed half the room, and its stare tore into every shattered piece of my soul. I slowly pulled the door shut and pressed my forehead against the cold door. I said, "This isn't, no. This is fine. Loneliness is getting the best of me. There's nothing here, just hallucinations." There's nothing. I pushed away from the door and looked down my hall. It seemed narrower than before, and each room on the left seemed farther away. The level below me appeared to sink farther than before, and the staircase kept growing more and more stairs. My mind bent as I tried to grasp the gravity of the situation, but alas, I could do no such thing. The woman who entered my home is clearly a witch of sorts. Many years ago, to protect myself from the deal I made with the devil, I had hired numerous priests to come and bless this home and ward it against evil spirits. But as is with all things, the priest warned me that evilness can return to this home, but it must be invited in. I must have invited the evil in. And I fear I just did that. I invited a witch into the home. Yes, that is the reason I can think of. And therefore, I do believe that this woman has come to curse me and steal my wealth, to take my beautiful home and use it for her rituals and spells. She will get no pleasure here from my labors. This is my home, my palace, my gold, mine. I sold my own wife for it all. She has no right to anything in my possession. My veins boiled with rage as my face became hot. I bit my bottom lip and scrunched my brow low. You terrible witch, I know what you're about, and you won't have my beautiful palace as your final resting place. I will not allow you to craft spells and curses or allow you to perform rituals in this home. Even if you kill me, I will break you as I did before, and now and forever after. Show yourself, you terrible fiend. Show yourself. I stood in wait at the top of my staircase. A response didn't come. No, only silence. I said, "Come on, witch. What's the matter? Afraid?" I smiled. Ha! Scared of a feeble old man? As I stood, the front door creaked open. It, without anything behind it to influence it, opened completely. Snow whipped into my home, but I waited. Someone would surely enter my home, but no. I waited for at least 10 minutes, long enough for my home to become cold and for my breath to be seen. No one came. Nothing came. I descended the staircase and shut the door. The gales of wind ceased, and at my ankles were shallow mounds of snow. I kicked through them and stood before my front door. If a witch were here to claim my home, wouldn't she be done with me by now? I'm only a feeble old man, and maybe my wife. No, she would never do that. She's a good woman. No, she wouldn't even consider it. My wife adored me. She fancied me a master artist and to be among the most humble of men. Her eyes never once looked upon me with resentment or disgust. No, she loved me with all her heart and trusted me. How stupid she was to trust me. How stupid she was to trust her husband. I turned away from my front door and looked up the staircase. My bedroom is upstairs and down the hall. I walk up the stairs and turn right down the hallway. Down the hall are 4 doors, 3 on the left, just beyond my artist room, and 1 on the right. I walked down the hall and entered my bedroom. As I entered my room, a certain kind of smell caught my nose. The smell of rot, and upon my bed stood the corpse of the man. I assume it was him anyway. He stood atop my bed. Purple splotches covered his body, and there were holes in his flesh where decay had taken root. This smell was different. I examined the bedroom. My golden bed remained made, and the crystal windows were not broken. The candles atop my bedside tables were lit, as they always are, and my closet to my left was shut. How this cadaver got in here is beyond me. This isn't real, isn't it? Is it? I don't know. I began to push the door shut when a raspy voice fell upon me. "Payment is due, Mr. Potts." I drew my eyes to the corpse and studied the back of his head. I said, "What?" Payment is due, Mr. Potts, the corpse said. Payment is due. Payment is due. Payment is due. Payment is. As I stood paralyzed by fear, the corpse turned around. His right eye socket was empty, and his left eye swiveled and fell upon me. The bones in his body made a grinding noise as he took a step toward me. His knees ground and popped. I've paid already. You don't know what you're doing, the corpse said. Payment is due, Mr. Potts. Payment is due. I shut the bedroom door and locked it. The sound of his leg dragging across the floor came to life, and as I stood in wait, my mind crumbled. Payment is due. Payment is due. I paid with the soul of my wife. I did. There shouldn't be anything left. I looked down my hall and toward the studio. I don't remember opening the studio door, but there it was, wide and open. The corpse slumped against the other side of my bedroom door and turned the handle. I gripped the handle, and it slid in my palm. Payment, the corpse uttered. Payment, payment, payment. I stepped away from the door as it creaked open. The man was much taller than I was. Not that I was very tall to begin with, no more than 5'5", but this man had at least a whole foot on me. I limped away from the door and crossed the hallway and entered my trophy room. The shine and gleam of golden trophies fell upon me, and on the other side of the door the corpse walked down the hall. It approached, its steps so slow, and his bones drag against the cold wooden floor. I can hear them. I can hear them scrape as the flesh, I think anyway, peel away from his feet. I only say this because I can hear it, the grotesque tearing of decaying flesh. After a deep breath, I grabbed a trophy beside me and held it in my hand. I looked down upon it. It was a simple trophy, the kind everyone has seen. A golden cup and nothing more. Etched inside the cup is my name and my achievement. World's greatest cadaver painter, Mr. Potts. I squeeze the golden trophy in my hand and twist the handle. The corpse is beyond this door. He does not breathe, nor does he wait. As he approached, he reached for the handle and began to turn it. I raised the trophy high and took aim at his skull. Once the door opened, I hammered down against his head. He did not flinch, nor did he budge. The corpse grabbed my wrist and pinned me against the ground. No, stop. I'll do anything. You can have it all the trophies, all the gold, all of it. I'll marry another woman and sell her soul to you. Just please don't take me, I begged. The corpse replied, payment is due. He yanked on my right arm. I felt it dislodge from its socket, and at once he began to drag me into my bedroom. I kicked and clawed at the floor, but he did not relent. The bones in his hand wrangled my wrist and clamped hard. I couldn't free myself. After a few long paces, the corpse opened my bedroom door, and something was atop my bed. It swirled in red and black swaths. A gateway to the devil's realm? No. I grabbed a trophy, and with all of my might, I beat against the corpse's arm until finally the arm broke and I was free. As I stood still and looked into the blood-red vortex, I saw the souls of those who reside within hell trying to escape. They pleaded, their eyes fell upon me, and they reached for me to help them, to save them. I turned away. Their problems are not my own. I must save myself. As I gazed into the abyss of hell, I saw the tiniest fragment of this world, and it terrified me. The horror of what was trying to take me spread its tentacles through every part of my soul. No, I cannot go there. No. Payment is due. Due payment, the corpse bellowed. I turned away from the cadaver and limped out of the room with my trophy in hand. I refused to go anywhere right now, but the corpse did not relent. I screamed, I've protected this place from demons like you. I cannot go. I fell to my side, and its slimy and decaying fingers wrapped around my ankle. It squeezed tight and pulled me into my bedroom. The cadaver swatted the trophy from my hand. Cadaver, I can cut a deal with the devil. You'll live again, I promise. But my words fell upon deaf ears. He did not listen, nor did he waver. I clawed at the floor and used every bit of my might with the hope of pulling away from the cadaver, only to no avail. His strength was far greater than mine, and there was nothing more I could do. He climbed atop the bed and stepped into the swirling vortex. I kicked at his arms and legs, at anything I could. He held my ankle above the vortex, and now, as the world around me froze in time, something beyond my doorway began to take shape. A light, soft and golden, illuminated the hallway. "Angel, angel of God," I screeched. The cadaver pulled me halfway into the vortex, but I hung on. Half of my body was here in this world, and the other half boiled and blistered because of the heat of hell. From the golden light emerged a woman with pale skin. Her eyes were familiar, and her hair was... "It's my wife, my wife." "Please, honey, dear, help me," I said as I reached for her. She stood still and void of expression. "Honey, please," I begged. Tears crept down my cheek as I looked into her eyes. She said, "Payment is due, Mr. Potts." My eyes widened as I realized she had sold my soul to save herself.